Well, hello again. This time we're going to be talking about television. I'm going to start off telling you something about the history of television, and then we'll get into some multi-channel services on television in a couple later lectures. For this one, I'm going to start off by showing you a picture of this guy here. This is Philo Farnsworth. He is the guy that we would say invented television. But other things happened before he was inventing the television. Paul Nipkow created what they call the Nipkow disc. He patented it in 1884 when he was only 24 years old. What this was a disc that was like a television. It was what they called a mechanical television. The problem with it was it never quite perfected a monitor, a way of seeing the actual picture. This was his challenge, and he never quite met it. Farnsworth did, and the way he did it was when he was 14 years old, he was out plowing a field, farmer, and he realized, the way that I go back and forth, I wonder if we could paint a picture on a tube that would do the same thing. In other words, the way we do today, where we put pixels going across, there's, a TV screen has so many pixels going across, and then, of course, so many rows going down. He came up with this when he was 14. And that was early 20s. He actually took the patent out in 1927. And he used mechanical TV concepts, but he was focusing on how he's going to get the picture on a screen. Okay. That was what his big contribution was, which was the main contribution to the TV, of course. Interesting things, though, happened, and I want to just give a real short story here. It's kind of interesting. This guy, Vladimir Zworykin, he was a Russian guy. He came to the United States in 1919, investigating and studying television because it was a hot topic in the research area for many, many years. But he came over, and he came up with some kind of an invention in 1923. It didn't work too well. So, he sort of fell to the wayside. But he came up with a very interesting camera, a iconoscope, in 1929. And that got the interest of this guy. This is David Sarnoff. And you may have heard this name because it's a very famous name in television. Sarnoff was sort of the first media mogul in the United States. He started RCA, Radio Corporation of America, in 1917. He was going to try to get all the patents for radio because he knew that it was coming. It was going to be a commercial venture. He wanted to basically have a monopoly. He didn't get quite a monopoly, but he was very instrumental in getting radio started. And he had a network called NBC, okay, National Broadcasting Corporation. And so anyway, Farnsworth invented TV, but Sarnoff, using his comrade here, Zworykin, what they did was Zworykin went to visit Farnsworth and said that he was from Westinghouse and they might be interested in using some of his stuff. Farnsworth was all excited, so he showed the guy all the secrets, how he did things. So Zworykin just sent a telegram that night to Sarnoff with all the secrets. And so RCA then started developing the television that Farnsworth had. So in other words, they stole the idea from him. Bottom line is Farnsworth never made a lot of money. In fact, his company started as Farnsworth TVs, went broke. He actually licensed his television idea to Germany, and they broadcast in 1936 on television using Farnsworth's ideas. But in 1939, once again, our buddy Sarnoff, he announced they had invented television. NBC had invented or RCA invented television, 1939. And so that's really when television really starts. The trouble is World War II comes up. And so very little is done for several years because most of the focus is on the war. But anyway, that's a short story about how it got started. And Farnsworth, there's a postage stamp of him. And this was released in 1983. They never released postage stamps for people who are actually still alive. Okay. So he got that in 1983. So he was quite an important person, first television ever, but he didn't get a whole lot of credit for it. Anyway, in the 1930s, like I said, this is when broadcast first started. It's, like I said, Farnsworth licensed his ideas to Germany, but NBC came on the scene in the 1930s. RCA, which was the parent company of NBC, as well as BBC, which was in England, the British Broadcasting Company. The real thing about Farnsworth that he contributed was the monitor. The trouble that they had with the mechanical TV was that they would try to do images that would come out real small. They didn't look very good, and they weren't very high quality. But Farnsworth actually contributed to, helping develop the CRT. That was his major contribution in television, which of course is all about television. If you didn't have the monitor, there's no television. Okay. So in the 1950s, television goes into its golden age. It just started in the 30s. By the 50s, now more people have TVs. They're all black and white TVs in the 1950s, but it became a household staple. And you had shows like Ed Sullivan and I Love Lucy. They're very popular. And what was happening was the transition from radio to TV was taking place, much like McLuhan said it would. The dominant medium, which became television in the 1950s, replaced radio as the primary focus of how it affected, of how people in the United States were affected, the population. So in the 50s, television became the thing to have. In 1960s, early 60s, color TV was introduced. Color TV was actually invented long before that, back in 1951. But none of the people that were broadcasting in color, so it didn't make any difference. Okay, so we introduced color TV in the 1960s. We also introduced standards such as NTSC standard. We talked about, I mentioned very briefly, talked about the industry, that one of the things the government does is it helps set the standards. So it sets a standard for the NTSC in the 1960s. And of course, TV became very popular, had a huge influence on popular culture and on advertising. Advertising became a huge, huge, huge thing on television. In the 70s and 80s, cable replaced broadcast as the number one way people got their TV shows. But cable had certain shows or certain networks that were only cable. HBO is the best example. It started in 1972 nationally. It's actually started locally about 1968. Satellites came into being as well, and that broadened the global content because satellites, you can upload satellites or download from many places in the world. So a big shift came in the 70s, 80s about how people watch TV. Programming used to be tied to the programming of the networks, how they wanted to program shows. But now with the VHS, which was also invented in the 1970s, we could record our shows whenever we wanted and watch them. So along came the 90s and 2000s, so we went from analog to digital broadcasting. The reason we did that was to save spectrum. I'll talk about that in more detail later, but basically spectrum is how the government assigns all the TV stations and radio stations a frequency. And they realized that digital broadcasting was much more efficient than analog. And if they had digital broadcasting required it, they could have more spectrum, which they could then lease to companies for other things. Primarily, it's leased to TV, not TV, but telephone companies. AT&T, Verizon, and even Google. Now, streaming also became possible in the 90s. They didn't get that popular. Netflix was still doing DVD rentals in the 90s. They started in 1997. What you would do is you would have, I was a subscriber back then. What you would do is you would have a wish list. You go to the website, have an account, and you'd have a wish list. These are all the movies I want to watch. They would send you 3 movies. You would watch one and mail it back to them. And then they would send you the next one on your wish list. And that's how it worked. Well, of course, this gave way in the 2010s to streaming, becoming the sort of the not yet dominant platform, but you can see now it probably is. And all the TV stations, TV channels are going that way. And so eventually it'll just all be streaming. We also integrated the internet in different ways into television, come up with smart TVs. So we watched all of our internet stuff. We could watch it on TV as well. AI also was introduced mostly with the remote controls, which we could then control. We could say, change to channel 6, change to channel 9, etc. So AI got a foothold then, and of course, it's gotten much bigger now. So in the 2020s, we're focused on really high resolution of our monitors with 4K and 8K resolutions. The OLED and the QLED are the 2 main types of, if you go buy a TV, though, you want to get one of those. And of course, interactive and immersive technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality, which we will talk about. We have a chapter on that as well. So what's the future hold? Well, these holographs you used to see on Star Trek in the 60s going to become a reality in TV in the future. We're going to be integrating TV more with your entire home because TV is going to be a multifunctional device, and it may become the central device in your house that does things like turn on the lights, turn off the dishwasher, that kind of thing. That may be just like the mobile phone is now. As we develop more and more functionality for AI, especially, television will become a much more important device. Okay, I'm going to stop there because next time I'm going to talk about multi-channel television services. But for right now, we're going to stop and you can take a break and come back later and watch the multi-channel television services. So I'll see you later.